Some UFO stories rely on rumors. This one relied on a police officer, physical evidence, and investigators who couldn't explain it. In April of 1964, in the desert near Socorro, New Mexico, something landed and then vanished. And what makes this case unsettling is that it was never solved. Police officer Lonnie Zamora was on patrol when he heard a loud roar in the distance. Not an explosion, not a jet, something unfamiliar. As he drove toward the sound, Zamora saw a blue-orange flame descending behind a hill. At first he believed a vehicle had crashed, but when he arrived, what he found didn't resemble any accident. In a shallow ravine sat a smooth, white oval-shaped object. Metallic, silent, and unlike any aircraft Zamora had ever seen. Nearby, he noticed two small humanoid figures dressed in white, standing beside the object. When they saw him, they appeared startled. Seconds later, the object began to roar again. A flame erupted from underneath. Dust and rocks blasted into the air, and the craft lifted straight up from the ground. Zamora ran for cover. The object ascended, lifted up, cleared the ravine, and disappeared into the sky. Now here's where it gets interesting. When investigators arrived, they found something unusual. Scorched soil, crushed vegetation, landing impressions pressed deep into the desert ground. The marks were real. The Air Force, the FBI, Project Blue Book all investigated the site. No hoax was proven. No experimental aircraft matched the description. Project Blue Book classified the case as unknown. Zamora never changed his story. He didn't seek publicity. He didn't write a book. He avoided interviews and attention for the rest of his life. And decades later, the evidence still doesn't point to an answer. So the mystery remains. If it wasn't a hoax and it wasn't human technology, what landed in the New Mexico desert that day? If you know, tell me in the comments. And here's a little something extra. It's about Project Blue Book, okay? So when the military took control of this investigation, the case was handed to Project Blue Book, the United States Air Force program tasked with studying unidentified flying objects. Now remember this name I'm about to tell you. At the center of Project Blue Book was J. Allen Hynek, okay? He seems to be everywhere there's a UFO crash or landing or anything UFO related. He was an astronomer brought in to evaluate UFO sightings using conventional science. Thing is, Hynek was not a believer. In fact, his job was to explain sightings away, not confirm them. He had already reviewed hundreds of UFO reports and dismissed most as aircraft, weather balloons, stars, or misidentifications. But this, the Zamora case, was different. When Hynek arrived in Socorro, he examined the landing site itself. He studied the scorched ground, the crushed desert plants, the deep impressions left in the soil. These were not stories. They were physical traces. Hynek later stated that the evidence did not fit any known aircraft, helicopter, or experimental military craft. There were no landing struts that matched known designs, no flight patterns consistent with jets or rockets, and no explanation for the sudden vertical ascent Zamora described. Most telling of all, Hynek could not debunk the case. Project Blue Book classified the Zamora incident as unknown, a category reserved for sightings that could not be explained after investigation. Now, years later, Hynek would openly criticize Project Blue Book, admitting that many cases were prematurely dismissed. Now, that's the interesting thing about Hynek. I'm going to have to do another episode on him. He went on to say that the Zamora encounter was one of the most credible UFO reports he had ever investigated. Here, you have a trained police officer, multiple witnesses to the secondary evidence, and physical traces at the landing site. There's no motive for deception. Like I said, he didn't write a book or seek publicity, anything. So for quiet mysteries, this is where the case truly becomes unsettling. Because even when the man tasked with skepticism couldn't find an answer, the mystery didn't end. It deepened. Okay, so here's a little bit more for you. Long before radar, long before aircraft, people were still reporting strange objects in the sky. In medieval and Renaissance Europe, artists often recorded unusual aerial phenomenon, not as science, but as part of religious or historical scenes. In several paintings, objects appear hovering in the sky, round, oval, disc-like, often emitting light. In one 16th century account from Nuremberg, witnesses described a mass sighting of strange shapes in the sky. Spheres, cylinders, crosses, moving as if engaged in an aerial display. There's a woodcut of this. Now, the event was illustrated in a woodcut, not as fiction, but as a record of what people believed what they saw. And if you look at the spheres, cylinders, and crosses, the crosses might look like airplanes. Then you have strange cylinders that people are still reporting today, and spheres, like the orbs people are seeing and reporting nowadays, like the bogosphere. Other Renaissance paintings show glowing objects positioned deliberately above crowds or landscapes, sometimes watching, sometimes descending. And you got to remember, at that time, there was no concept of aircraft, no language for advanced technology. So these objects were interpreted through the only framework available, their religion, symbolism, divine signs. So they're relating this with what they knew. The shapes themselves are curious. And these wood carvings, they're smooth, geometric, strangely unfamiliar. So not unlike the descriptions given centuries later by police officers, pilots, and radar operators, different centuries, different explanations, but similar forms. Quiet Mysteries doesn't ask you to believe these were spacecraft, only to notice the pattern that across history, humans have looked up and recorded things they could not explain. And when you widen a timeline far enough, the mystery doesn't disappear. It multiplies. When Lonnie Zamora looked into the New Mexico desert in 1964, he didn't have radar. He didn't have infrared cameras. There's no advanced tracking systems. None of that existed. All he had was his eyes. Centuries earlier, artists painted strange objects in the sky, not knowing what they were, only that they were there. Decades later, after Zamora saw this, trained military pilots would describe craft with the same shapes, the same movements, and the same lack of explanation. Different centuries, different witnesses, different technology, yet the descriptions remain strangely consistent. Quiet Mysteries doesn't tell you what these objects are, only that across history something has been seen, recorded, and left unanswered. And maybe the real mystery isn't why we still don't have an explanation, but how long we've been asking the same question. Some mysteries don't fade with time. They wait.